This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. I lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Welcome to the Special Chronicles podcast, special Labor Day 2024 live stream. This is Daniel Smrokowski. I am the founder and host of Special Chronicles, a service ambassador at United Airlines, and a Southern Tribal Global Messenger alum with Special Olympics. Our website, specialchronicles.com. We can do more archives, and we can follow Special Chronicles on socials and wherever you get your podcast, specialchronicles.com. This week on the Special Chronicles podcast, special live stream, it all started with an impromptu chat at O'Hare Airport. Join in me on this special live stream as I sit down with Jonathan Sutter, CEO and founder of Traveling Wiki, as we follow up our conversation to learn more about the largest nonprofit resource center for travelers with special needs. Please put your virtual hands together as we welcome Jonathan on Special Chronicles Live. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. I feel at home in the United Club, right? Right behind you.
Yes. Rome in the United Club. I believe it or not, I'm sure our viewers can probably tell that we are virtually, but believe it or not, on the Unified at Work series that's on this podcast, back 5 years ago, I did record 5 episodes from the United Polaris Club in Chicago. So including with, he's currently the chief operations officer, and then the previous DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion officer at United Airlines, and then with some other colleagues as well. So I'm obviously not there tonight doing the busy travel time, but yeah, I have. So for our listeners, before we get into talking about your foundation, I thought we could kind of get our listeners up to speed with how we got connected, because it was a week ago. It was the final 10 minutes before the end of my shift as a service ambassador at United Airlines, and you had stopped me because of my co-branded United Special Olympics uniform, in particular the Special Olympics side of that uniform, and it was the final minutes, and like what my job is to answer questions, and so I had thought that you were asking me like where your gate was, and then it turned into a 10-minute conversation that is now turned into a week later, you coming on this podcast. But in your own words, why don't you kind of I shared my perspective of how we got connected, but why don't you recap for our listeners how we got connected?
Sure. And I will say on your shirt, the words Special Olympics appeared, and for me that has a very special meaning. And it started for us, above and beyond what we do, which I will explain further. We were profiled in the Special Olympics newsletter in Georgia by the CEO and the organization, but working directly with the CEO in their holiday edition in December 2023. And that was exceptionally meaningful. So seeing that on your shirt and, traversing O'Hare, I just reached out and wanted to connect with you to understand why that was on your shirt and what that meant. And learning about the ambassador work, related international global messenger ambassador work you do for Special Olympics, and being one of, very select few that does that internationally, it's exceptionally meaningful. And just that, along with a lot of other things, led to this conversation today. But, because of what we do and because of what we have, tried to advocate paid for. It's exceptionally meaningful to have that interaction with you and learn about, this podcast and everything you do for the Special Olympics community.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. It was it's always amazing to interact with our United passengers. But little did I, like, once we got connected and we exchanged contact information, which I probably should let in case tell people that I don't share my contact information with just any passenger.
Really?
But for privacy and just, especially having this this podcasting platform outside of my day job at United, I don't like to don't want a lot of people reaching out to me. But once we that 10-minute conversation, which I think goes to show that the viewers probably see Bridge on my Apollo right now. A big thing at United is connecting people and uniting the world. Bridge, which is one of the business resource groups, is connecting people of all abilities. So really, that connection speaks a lot into what our disability business resource group does at United. It also kind of it speaks to what United Airlines is all about, which is really connecting people. And so, can you share and tell us a little bit about, without getting too personal, but what's your connection to our disability community? Because I think that will kind of give a good kind of backstory into what we're going to talk about on the program today. But what's your kind of connection to our disability community?
Sure, certainly. And, I will say that the work we do as part of this foundation that I'll describe now is meaningful. I just want to make sure I reinforce at the beginning of this. This is very meaningful to be on the conversation with you specifically and as part of this podcast. I learned, so I've spent my career in aviation and travel, probably 25 years. I was an intern at Gates in '96 during the Summer Olympics for Delta, Gates and charters and that kind of stuff. And it's gone on since then. And I learned of a challenge in travel. And what I learned was that there were many people who, specifically in the autism and neurodiverse community, were not flying. Were just, families were just telling that maybe they had a child that was neurodiverse, telling that individual, as a family, it's like a rock concert. We're not going. It's just too much. And I kept hearing this repeatedly. I heard it, over and over and over again. And then I started to learn of resources. It started in Pittsburgh with what Christina Casotis and the team have done to build Presley's Place. And I had a chance to meet Presley's dad, Jason Rudge, or virtually meet Presley's the dad, Jason Rudge. Presley is a child on the spectrum. Presley's dad, Jason, works for the airport, and the resource center they have for the autism and neurodiverse community is built in their honor based on his, original suggestion at the airport. There are many resources in Pittsburgh and beyond. And Jason told me a lot of the community doesn't even know it's there, even though, it's a very crowded, noisy environment we live in, and it's hard to connect with people. And so I wanted to connect in a very meaningful way to let people know about these resources. So essentially, back to the answer to your question, my connection is trying to address a challenge that is people completely leaving aviation and travel as a means of, they're either driving, surface transportation, or not going at all. And I think travel is enormously empowering and important in society. So of course, I'm not, with my resource that I've now built, which is the largest of its kind in 11 languages, spanning, like so many resources across the United States and utilized by people worldwide. And now the sole resource of its kind for 20 million special needs Americans on TSA.gov. It's not, it is about empowering those individuals with resources. And we'll get into other resources that we have as well. But it's attempting to make an earnest attempt to solve a challenge, and with individuals with something that's incredibly empowering and I think, can really help change the trajectory of people's lives.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And you touched on something in particular about the autism center that's at the Pittsburgh airport, which is a note that I made in preparing for our live conversation today. That I'll leave our listeners or viewers on the edge of those seats because we're going to come back to that in a couple of seconds from now. But it's all about keeping our listeners listening in to the whole episode today. But we're going to go on and just take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get into the backstory of Traveling Wiki with our guest, Jonathan Sutter, right here on specialchronicles.com. And quick note to let all of you listening out there know, support for Special Chronicles comes from listeners like you. Please join our supporters with a monthly or one-time donation to help us operate our studio and continue our mission of giving respect and voice to those of us with disabilities. You can visit specialchronicles.com/plus to join and access all exclusive bonus content. Again, specialchronicles.com/plus to make a monthly or one-time donation starting at $10 a month and up, or any one-time donation. Please join today at specialchronicles.com/plus. And with that, I'm Jonathan. You told us a little bit about your connection. I think that will speak into now a little bit about the backstory. Can you, before we get into that note that I made, but take us back to the very early days, because I'm so glad that we got connected. Talk about the work that you do, because for myself and so many of those Americans with and anyone of us with special needs, it's so gratifying to have somebody that is working with the TSA and compiling all these resources. Because I know for myself and for my parents, there's so many. There can be so many resources out there, and a lot of times online, people don't know, might not always know what's true and what's not, and so can you take us back and when did you start Traveling Wiki, and what inspired you to start this foundation?
Yeah, I mean, so the inspiration was learning of the challenge and just saying, no one's built this, I'm going to go build it. And like a resource center. The challenge that I think, just as somebody who's spent a lot of years in this industry and the intricacies of travel and planning and aviation and the like, is that it's a very complex ecosystem for somebody. Let's say you are a family that's deciding, well, let's try this journey. There are, as a preliminary item, there are a lot of different stakeholders that impact the likelihood of success of your journey. So let's say I'm going to take an example journey. Let's say you live in the eastern part of the country. Let's use Baltimore, Maryland, doesn't matter. You're going to connect somewhere in the middle of the country and you're going to the west side of the country. Let's say it's Seattle. Doesn't really matter where it is. You have, at a minimum, in that scenario, 5 different stakeholders that are largely impacting your journey. You've got the airport, which controls the environment where you leave from. If you're connecting, you've got the airport. So number 2, the airport where you're connecting in that environment. 3rd is the airport where you're your destination where you're going to return from. 4 is TSA, which is controlling the security at your departure airport and your return airport. And then 5 is the airline. And that just assumes you're on one single mainline airline and not connecting to some regional airline. It's really complex. And all of those different stakeholders have different procedures and the like. So what I learned is, well, if we're going to create a database and an information source it's interesting, you mentioned there's, inaccurate information. Veracity is really important. And I think that's paramount in what we do. We are trying to be a credible source. There's so much information on the internet that's non-credible, that's, sort of this, what do we call this, mendacious, whatever we call it, right? And so we're trying to be the credible source of information. And originally we had Wiki in the name because we wanted to be a community input resource where people like Wikipedia could, contribute. But what we soon learned is when we signed this agreement, we have an agreement with TSA to be this provider of information on their non-visible disability page. We're now the sole provider, 20 million Americans, for these resources. we needed to make sure it was accurate. And so as a former attorney, what I decided to do is I'm going to do this. It's going to be, we're going to update the information as the foundation, and we're going to footnote everything back to the source documentation. And we unfortunately can't have anybody in the world modify it, just because Wikipedia has a community of moderators that checks everything. We just don't have those kind of resources, as an organization that's not monetizing this, is just trying to provide a public service. But again, going back to your question, we are trying to solve the problem of people abandoning air travel. It's something we think is really important, by being the what we consider the gold source of information, the veracity, if you will, associated with these journeys, and the information and support that can be provided in all these different touch points by all these different providers. We can't provide all the information about all the airlines, because the airlines have different procedures, and you may connect to a regional airline, but certainly we want to try and connect to all the airlines and provide as much information as is possible at the airports. And then we have the partnership with TSA, so they have a program that helps you with security.
Awesome. I love that, and especially I'm sure that there's a lot of adults with disabilities and parents and family members and caregivers in our community, that what you just shared about how your foundation is a credible source of information and how you're solving a problem. I'm sure that's bringing a lot of joy and smiles to their faces, that your foundation and your resource is something that I'm sure so many are gonna look for. For those of you that are watching the live stream later, listening to the audio podcast, in the description below, we've put links to your resource in the description below. So wherever you're tuning in from right now, our listeners can have the information, and I'll put links to other resources that we'll get to at the end of the program. But can you tell us
thing there?
Yeah.
And I also thought about this as the way to be useful is not solely to be credible to the opposite, to one end of the continuum. It's also to make it accessible. And so one of the other things is certainly, there's no perfection in accessibility. It's very difficult to, we're constantly learning. We're constantly learning from people how we can make it more accessible. But I started putting it in different languages. And as an organization that doesn't monetize this, it's not like we have this big marketing budget to go out and do that. But I started one after the other, putting it in different languages. So my wife speaks French, and I speak Spanish. Obviously, both speak English. And then in German, and then in Japanese, and then in Hebrew, and then in Arabic, and then in in Russian, and then 11 languages. And I've met just examples over the last couple of weeks. French consul talking about French speaking individuals around the world leveraging this for traversing U.S. airports. I've met with the EU ambassador to the United States, and also spoke to individuals in that, the related organizations about EU citizens traveling to the United States. We've met with the Austrian ambassador. We've met with the Israeli ambassador. We've met with just ambassador after ambassador. I mean, like 10 plus different ambassadors. We've met with the White House. We've met with, the officials in the White House, 30 plus senators from across the country. The goal, just going back to the original point, is not just to let's make the perfectly credible resource. It's also to learn from a variety of perspectives about how it can be utilized, and talk to community members that actually use it and give us feedback and implement that kind of feedback. And so that's what we're trying to do, to make it approachable, accessible, and not only credible, but approachable, accessible, credible, and implementing. As you said, credible today might not be the same thing as credible tomorrow, because a certain airport might close a resource and open a new one, or might have it under construction for a year. So it's a constant game of constant task.
Awesome. I love that. And we're going to get into a bunch more about the resources, including, I'm sure, and some of my colleagues at United Airlines are going to love hearing about your experience at the Pittsburgh airport with the autism resource. Perfect timing to have you on, because we're going to leave them at the edge of the seats, and we'll be back in just 30 seconds from now after a quick break to let you all know that support for Special Chronicles comes from the ComEd Energy Force Ambassador Program, the country's first energy and solar efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. Learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. That's specialchronicles.com/ComEd. And Special Chronicles support for Special Chronicles comes from United Airlines Bridge Disability Business Resource Group, connecting people of all abilities, including hiring Special Olympics athletes like myself, service ambassadors for employees at United Airlines. You can learn more on United's commitment to disability inclusion for employment and travel at specialchronicles.com/United, specialchronicles.com/United. And our guest is Jonathan Sutter, CEO of Traveling Wiki. And I made a note, actually a couple notes, Jonathan, because that's how I know some of my colleagues at our Bridge Business Resource Group are going to love this part. And so I'm going to kind of I'm jumping around my notes here, but I thought it's perfect, kind of perfect timing. About you had mentioned at the Pittsburgh airport, the Presley Center has a sensory room. We have bi-weekly calls, and a couple of my colleagues, not me, at least I'm things might change last minute, but a couple of my colleagues are actually going to go to the Pittsburgh airport just for a day trip to hear about this, because that's something that that we're trying to advocate for on these sensory rooms in airports, in particular United hubs and stations. And so can you tell us and kind of give us just what in podcasting what we call a sound scene audio tour and describe the scene for us as in just a brief audio tour at the Pittsburgh airport of this Presley Center?
Sure. I believe it's an A, so it's airside. Post security, you ride the train, and so what's unique about Pittsburgh and some other airports and distinct versus maybe LaGuardia is that the terminals are connected. So they have a resource center. I think it's down near A7, A9, something like that. You walk once you take the train, you go up the escalator, you go towards A. There's a sign to go to Presley's place. There's a phone at the door, and you ask for a code and you enter a code. The reason they do that and to just make it open is that they want people to have that extra step to, I mean, again, if you say you want to use it, you're allowed to use it, but you're trying to make sure that those that have the specific circumstances that it was set up for are leveraging it, not just somebody who wants a quiet place to sit and doesn't actually leverage the resources for the intended purpose. Inside the Presley's place, there is a mock airplane cabin with multiple rows of seats. An environment that, very much if you're trying to acclimate an individual with autism on the spectrum to what will likely happen on the plane, it really feels like you're in a plane. Like you can say, okay, let's say the parent's name is Jill and the child's name is Jackie. Okay, Jackie, mom is going to sit here and a stranger's going to sit on the other side, and there's the bathroom and the pilots are going to be up there, like to practice. There are a number of sensory rooms. There is the FIDS, like the flight display area, where you can keep tabs on your flight and everything, are inside the room, so you don't have to leave. There are other resources for a variety of other circumstances where you can have privacy and maybe somebody, a caregiver of somebody caregiver and the individual might be able to have privacy in whatever environment they might need, whatever circumstance might be before the flight. And again, where I think a lot of the stress, and it's not just stress, right? It's a scenario where the environment can create like overstimulation is, let's say there's a 3-hour delay. Let's say it's severe storms. Let's say it's a winter in Pittsburgh and you're having a major winter storm and the flight keeps getting delayed. And like, you don't have to leave that more calm environment. You can actually check everything inside the environment. Obviously your electronic devices work too. But it sort of gives you some comfort, and you're around other individuals, presumably, that maybe have similar circumstances. So that's, I think, great. And I guess I'll say this though, Pittsburgh, so again, two things are often said to us. Number one, why aren't there more airports? And, I don't control what airports put this in, what airports add these resources. And so there aren't more airports, unfortunately, either because there are some researchers, like we learned, we're in Pennsylvania documenting some of these. Philadelphia, I think, has a quiet room. We're trying to track that down and add more information about that. So some of them are just because, they're not necessarily labeled as autism or neurodiverse. They're labeled as something else. And we just haven't yet documented them in a way to try to identify how they might be helpful. Others, the other airports just haven't installed resources yet, and we'd love for them to be installed. I mean, you mentioned when we took at the major mainline airline. Sorry, but I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no. I was making a note to because I know a bunch of my colleagues at Bridge, or Disability Business Resource Group, are hopefully going to be listening in, and I kind of jumping off of how you've been describing the sensory room at the Pittsburgh airport. And it'd be great if more hubs and more stations can have this. Can you speak directly to my colleagues at United Airlines, in particular, our Bridge Disability Business Resource Group, on what advice that you have for them to get more airports, get more United hubs and stations to have sensory rooms in the airports? I know it might be a difficult question, but like what advice do you have for them to? And I know each airport is unique, just like each one of us with disabilities are unique. But can you speak directly to my colleagues at United Airlines on what on how they can particularly the airline in collaboration with a lot of our hubs to get a sensory room?
Yeah, and is it maybe? Am I speaking to a hypothetical person? Like, I used to work in airport strategy. Am I talking to a hypothetical person in the airline and airport strategy, or a senior executive?
I would say both, because I know we've got a wide variety of both senior executives at United that listen to this podcast, and then others as well. So I guess both, if you could kind of speak to both.
I mean, if you had to break down, how do you convince people of things? Well, sometimes you show numbers, and sometimes it boils into a public policy or maybe an emotional discussion. So I'll take the former and the latter. The former, Senator Harkin wrote the ADA, Iowa. Our biggest state is Iowa. Senator Harkin's institute, so Daniel Van Sant, I don't want to mischaracterize Daniel's words, because I would leave it to the Harkin Institute. They're affiliated with Drake University. We're starting an occupational therapy and a capstone program with Drake University in the spring. But their institute, and again, this is founded by the author of the ADA, and their policy expert is telling us this. 25%, up to 25% of the U.S. population, that's 80 million people, are disabled. So, I mean, I understand we're talking not necessarily about something that's going to be used by all 80 million, but this is not an inconsequential number. And there are certainly I mean, we don't have great data on this. I mean, I think one of the representatives out of California just introduced some legislation that doesn't touch on this specifically, other aspects of data. And we met with the former head of the Autism Society of America on Capitol Hill on some other legislation. But there's not right now great data on this, on who's flying and who's not flying and the like. But the practical reality is anecdotally, we've learned through a lot of engagement. We've been with 30 senators directly on this and so many individuals across the United States. A lot of people aren't flying. And there are a number of people that are just not being immersed into the aviation ecosystem, and that economically has an impact. On the public, policy perspective. So, it's a means for, if you don't have it in the hub airports, I mean, the airlines with the biggest number of ASMs in this country all have at least one big airport with a hub. But let's say you have your hub on the southeast corner of the United States or the northwest corner of the United States, and you have other hubs that are elsewhere. If that particular hub does not offer a connection with a good fare or whatever, it makes it less practical. And it means people might shift away to other airlines or other journeys if they are going to fly. And so that all has economic impact. Now, on the policy side of it, it's about serving a meaningful portion of the population and making what are common carriers as accessible as possible. And these are not just some hypothetical individuals. These are our children. These are our, we don't serve just neurodiverse. We serve 20 million is Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, ALS, autism. We went out to Marin County in California to help start serving the Down syndrome community. We are working cerebral palsy and the like. These are our grandparents. These are our cousins. These are our kids. These are our neighbors. These are our teachers. These are our clergy. These are so many people in our communities. So from a policy perspective, I think it's incumbent upon us as a society to try and make something that is a transportation ecosystem, something that helps individuals do what they want to do, and help them be able to see relatives, help them go do whatever career they want to go do, and not think, well, I have to swear off all these careers because that would involve travel, and I can't do that.
Awesome. I love that. And speaking of the 20 million Americans that you just mentioned, in a lot of these different groups, whether it's autism, ALS, Parkinson's, dementia, or Alzheimer's, a lot of these different communities. Can you just kind of give us a couple of quick examples of how you are working with all this? Because as we know, and I'm sure some of our listeners might know, our disability community, it's anybody can join it at any time, whether those of us that were born with our challenges or just anybody. So kind of in these 20 million Americans and all these different community groups, whether it's autism or dementia or Alzheimer's or ALS or Parkinson's, is there one or two examples of how you are working with these disability communities to document resources for the TSA for your foundation? How are you working? Like how? Yeah. Do you have focus groups, or how do you do it?
We're trying to. Our impetus, our sort of our North Star in each airport is the resource and not necessarily the community members. And I'll explain that further. Let's take neurodiversity. Let's even just try and take the spectrum of autism. It's a spectrum. You have such a wide variety of circumstances. There's no way I, as an individual, could possibly detail how it's relevant for 8 million people who all have unique circumstances. So we've tried to say, okay, let's take the resource and let's describe it in a way, using maps, using source links, using imagery, using, again, 11 languages, to try to make it understandable to individuals that might want to see it on my page, might want to click into the underlying link and go to the source documentation. And then we've tried to engage with groups. Like we went on the Capitol Hill and we met with, like the Alzheimer's, one of the Alzheimer's associations, big ones in the United States had an advocacy day. We went to lunch, and we were able to talk to Senator Markey, and we were able to speak to the founder of Alzheimer's AFA, whatever the organization was, and a lot of different stakeholders. We've been profiled on I think Autism Speaks website, autism community, and a lot of On the Spectrum Foundation. We're on every page they have in their footer. So we've spoken to different community members, and as we try to go to serve these, as I said, mentioned before, we worked with, went out to lunch with a self-advocate in the Down syndrome community out in California, as well as San Geronimo Valley Community Center from Marin County. And we just discussed it, said, for the self-advocate, what was it like when you traveled? How did it go? What was good? What was bad? And it's sort of almost like a journey map of his journey. Okay, let's understand what your journey was like. And of course, that's a sample size of one, but it allowed me to have an intelligent electronic conversation with the head of TSA and say, this is what was conveyed, and allowed me to immerse that information into, inform me as to what maybe we should be thinking about. But, unfortunately, it is not possible, I don't think, realistically, to know how to serve, how to document that something that will be applicable to everyone. The other thing we've had to do in certain airports, and I use Cleveland as an example, I grew up in Northeast Ohio, they don't have an autism or neurodiversity area. They have some quiet rooms in I think what is meant to be a more religious area. And we've said, well, these are rooms that you can close off. They're quiet. They're low sensory. I'm going to document them. And some people are going to say this is helpful for us. And some people are going to say this is not at all helpful. And that's to their own, it's up to us to document it in a way that they can at least find out more information and maybe reach out to the airport and figure out if it's going to be relevant. And it also helps them, we have certain catchment areas around Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania. You've got 3 airports to choose from. Since we've documented Cleveland, we've also documented what Akron has, which is this very small room for, airport with very, few passengers daily each way, right? It's a small area of an MSA. And then you've got Pittsburgh, which has this huge, robust resource center. So people in each geographic area, when they're making a decision about what airport they should leave from, where they should connect, where they should return from, how to leverage TSA resources, they can make more informed decisions.
Awesome. I love that. We're going to touch on just a moment about the TSA chaos, but I want to kind of take it back a little bit to how we got connected. About you had saw Special Olympics on my co-branded uniform as a service ambassador at United Airlines, and I've been a Special Olympics athlete for a little bit over 20 years now. I had a lot more hair back then. I've been an athlete leader both in Illinois, and then on the international level, the past 5 years have been the Southern Shriver Global Messenger is the highest athlete leadership role in the movement. Of every 4 years, there's only 10 of us athlete leaders that are selected across the globe, and so. Can you tell us how you work with Special Olympics, how you got connected with the Special Olympics movement? You had mentioned that you were featured December 2023 in the Special Olympics Georgia newsletter. Did you only get connected with one Special Olympics program, or have you got connected with our chairman of Special Olympics International is Tim Shriver, our CEO is Mary Davis. Have you got connected with the international headquarters for this movement? Can you tell us a little bit about how you got connected with Special Olympics and how they are supporting your nonprofit resources?
Absolutely. So I really appreciate these questions. Let me also say, I think it's really important to reinforce you're one of 10 people in the world that represent a very, very, very important community. Thank you for this opportunity. I think it reinforced your comments reinforce just how much of an honor it is to be on the show. And I take, as I say all this time, and we take this very seriously. This is people's lives. This is trajectory of people's lives. This is opportunities. This is really important stuff. To answer your question, so the former chief operating officer of the city of Atlanta introduced me to the CEO of the Special Olympics of Georgia, Georgia Milton Sheets, ironically her name is Georgia. She invited us to an advisory board meeting for the Special Olympics of Georgia.
Mhm.
That actually, so that, alongside that, contemporaneous with that, we were profiled in the Special Olympics of Georgia newsletter in their December holiday season. It's all about the December holidays.
Mhm.
And I think that, I don't have the exact language in front of me, but it describes the idea that we are supporting with our resources to be an athlete. Let's say the Special Olympics events are across the world. You're going to have to fly. I mean, if you were in Kansas City and you need to go to St. Louis, you could use surface transportation. If you're going to Paris, you've got to fly and you've got to leverage resources. And so I think the language is about leveraging those resources and providing the leveraging of those resources, given that we're in 11 languages and we serve people around the world, the opportunity in 11 languages around the world to be Special Olympics athletes, to not only support the athletes, but their families. More recently, we have been able to meet with 2 members of the Kennedy Shriver family. And that was very meaningful. I think Eunice Kennedy Kennedy Shriver came up in both conversations. To have a meaningful discussion about this, and to the extent, I mean, we've had a much more robust conversation in Georgia specifically in what we're doing. We don't just serve. What we're trying to do is serve the range of stakeholders that are that may, it's the child. We're having a special needs job session. So one of the things we did learn by the Special Olympics luncheon was we heard a presentation at the advisory board meeting by somebody who's using farming to open up more opportunities for jobs. And we took that as a call to action for our organization to go make a dent in special needs unemployment, because special needs unemployment is amazingly high in some areas of the community around the United States. So we have started working extensively on that. And one of the ways that we're doing that, and we met with the governor and others in Iowa, in South Carolina next weekend, September 7th, we're doing the first of its kind job session where in aviation specifically, Republic Airways Training Academy in Myrtle Beach, we're working with I think it's the vice chair, James Mack, Autism Society of South Carolina, and a trainer at Leadership and Flight Training Academy. And we are telling the special needs community, and it's on a Saturday, so high school students can come also, about opportunities in aviation for those in special needs. So we've become not only, and again, this is inspired by Special Olympics and the advisory board meeting. We've become not only an outlet for providing travel resources, but now jobs resources and ag resources and all these other areas to empower. Like, that's what we're about, empowering individuals.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely, in particular through the athlete leadership program of Special Olympics, it definitely is empowering us, not just on the field of play, but off the field as well. We have the upcoming World Winter Games in Turin, Italy is in March of 2025, and then I believe in 2027 is the next World Games in Santiago, Chile, and so those and I know in particularly the only airline that I'm mentioning is my employer, but United Airlines, I know where you can donate your miles to Special Olympics. So it's awesome that you are connecting with this movement and with the world's largest health organization for people with disabilities. It's a really big movement, and we're gonna kind of switch now back a little bit. You mentioned the 11 languages that you have translated your resources into a few times. My mom, she's now retired, but she was a foreign language. Linda.
Linda, okay.
She was a foreign language teacher in Spanish, French, and German.
Wow.
Not all at the same time, but like she has in both public and private schools. She's now retired. But so with that, why did you want to offer these? It might be obvious because those travelers with disabilities traveling across the country that not only speak English but also in different languages as well. So it might be obvious, but why did you feel necessity to offer these resources in 11 languages.
Accessibility of resources and understanding the information is critical, and it's as a foundation, as an organization that has a mission that we've documented and we talk to our stakeholders about. We, I think, have both a opportunity, but also it's a privilege that we have, but we also have a responsibility to ensure they're leveraged and to ensure we provide them to people in a way that can be leveraged. And so when we started thinking about different communities across society, and things like in the neurodiverse community, early intervention and accessibility of resources, we started to learn through data that different communities across society have higher prevalence of neurodiversity but fewer resources. And so we started to say, well, how can we make a dent in ensuring that our resources are available and are we fulfilling that mission? And one of the ways we decided to do that was to put the resources in 11 languages. And so, we met, as an example, we've met with multiple people on Capitol Hill who represent a lot of stakeholders that primarily speak Spanish. I speak Spanish myself. And, as somebody who takes that very seriously, and ensuring that, especially in an airport, when we look at certain airports that have a catchment area where a large amount of the population that is served by the airport as their home O&D airport or whatever, they're speaking a different language, then we probably logically, going back to this idea of trying to serve people, we should be in the languages. So we started I think with Spanish and French. And then it led to German, and then it led to Japanese, and then it led to Hebrew, and then it led to Arabic, and then it led to Russian, and then it led to Mandarin, like one and one. I don't know if that's sequential. That wasn't sequential order. It was probably some different order, but it led to 11 languages. It's about accessibility, and it's about providing a resource that's helpful. I mean, at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is make sure, I was a volunteer teacher. I volunteer taught back where I'm from in Ohio. And it occurred to me when I did this, a student, when they tell me in a high school class what they're going to go do in their life, their discussion, their response to me, their retort as to what they want to go do is, impacted inherently by what they think is accessible to them. Like if they are a certain height that is not likely to play in professional athletics, then they're probably going to say that career is probably not accessible to me because I'm just not tall enough or whatever it is, right? If they are told repeatedly or think very, earnestly that travel is something that is sort of like going to a heavy metal rock concert, it's just not something their family, they can do, then they're going to rule out certain careers that require travel. I just think let's try and make these resources as accessible as possible so people can have access to this public transportation, this aviation ecosystem.
Awesome. I love that. And building upon what you had talked about earlier about connecting with the TSA kills. This is so. I want to just touch on a couple of things that you said. One was that you were working with the unemployment of those of us with disabilities, and something before United Airlines and Special Olympics, the global partnership got together to. I was one of the first full athletes that United hired, a brand new groundbreaking inclusive employment program that started in October 2019. October 28th, 2019, quickly coming up on the 5-year anniversary in just a couple months from now. But about a month from now. And so back in my special ed classes, in the job skills classes, for myself and for a lot of us with disabilities, a job in aviation, working for a major U.S. airline, was not something that we were told was possible. So I want to touch on that the side of the foundation of the work that you're doing to hopefully reach out to more with disabilities, that this type of job is possible, is just an empowering thing that you're doing. And then you had mentioned the TSA kills. For the first few years that I was looking for United Airlines, I honestly didn't know about the TSA kills. And then once like part of my job as a service ambassador is to help and talk with passengers with wayfinding and where to go in. And I know I've had a few people that have asked in particular for the TSA kills. And now I know in our supervisor and managers office, we've got little business cards that say TSA KOs, and they've got the hotline and the information. So can you tell us about a little bit more about how your foundation is connected with the TSA KOs, and a little bit more about how you, I know we'll coming up on about 15 minutes now, so we've got just a few minutes. Hopefully it's not, this episode won't be longer than an hour. So, but I guess kind of briefly how your foundation is working with TSA kills.
So I had a conversation initially with Administrator Pekoski. So Administrator Pekoski leads TSA. He reports into Homeland Security, Mayorkas, and President Biden's cabinet. So he's 2 steps away from the president of the United States. And we had a conversation about this, and I think it led to a series of discussions with others in TSA about this kind of resource and trying to earnestly create a resource that could be leveraged. And that subsequently led in 2023 to us becoming the sole resource for those with non-visible disabilities. So CARES has all these different listings of, let's say somebody's, they have visual impairment and this and that, non-visible disabilities. We are the sole resource. We were recognized, we are not, I don't work for TSA, right? We're a partner of TSA, but we serve, if you call the TSA hotline and you say autism, the phone, I see a phone number on your screen now. We have our own hotline for people who want to reach, out to us. Actually, the hotline is 6417 autism. It says 641 autism, 6417 autism, just so you know. And that's just a phone number in Iowa. But TSA has a phone hotline, and if you call TSA, they will refer you to us. If you go on TSA.gov, it will refer to us. That's the TSA Cares hotline. That's their hotline, the one you have on the screen. There was a press release issued in early January 2024, Administrator Pekoski's Innovation Year in Review press release. They noted in that specifically, and this was spread. We saw this press release in Africa. I kid you not. This is spread all around the world. And they cite specifically to that they had engaged 187 organizations in 2023, and in their Innovation Year in Review press release, they highlighted and linked to Traveling Wiki Foundation specifically for our work in this regard. And as I said, we take that very seriously. As I said, we heard about this in Africa. We heard about this in Asia Pac. We heard about this across the United States media, just over and over and over again, how widespread it was that TSA issued that, and hearing the feedback. It's very serious because there are, again, disabilities are just much more frequent, or the incidence rate is much higher than people recognize, and people need these resources. So that's where we come in, and that's the relationship with TSA, trying to be a public resource, serving the public.
Awesome. I love that. In preparing for our time together, which just because I'm so busy with not only with my job at United Airlines, but also this Special Chronicles podcast and platform, and being a special Olympics athlete. So I was doing my preparation this afternoon, even though it's a Labor Day. Most people don't. I should say most people don't work on a holiday, but unless you unless you work for an airline and you have this podcasting platform, you work on a day where most people don't work. But anyways, I will in the preparation today, one of the news coverage, I think on the ABC local affiliate in Iowa.
We are Iowa, ABC Iowa, yeah.
Yeah, ABC Iowa. You had talked a little, and both that, and then in the information that you had emailed me about receiving positive feedback from the community. Can you is there one or two quick examples of some of the positive feedback that you have received from travelers from our disability community that have reached out to you? Is there maybe one or two examples that kind of come at the forefront?
I mean, it was very meaningful to have the discussion, and we actually had it in San Francisco, but we were serving Marin County via this community center, to have the conversation with the self-advocate and have the feedback, and then follow up after the fact. With this was the engagement with Administrator Smrokowski, and this is how we relayed the feedback. That was specifically meaningful in the Down syndrome community. I think we were on the front page, literally, of Autism Speaks on the top of the website. And again, there are so many different organizations. We are, on the Spectrum Foundation. So, the founder of that foundation is a, well-known author, et cetera, who is, he characterized it as twice exceptional, 2E, and self-advocate. They've put us, as a result of this, on every page. We're in the footer, every page of that website. We also spoke, and this isn't somebody in the community specifically, but we've spoken to the former, somebody who's very affiliated with that on the Spectrum Foundation, the former mayor of Moab, Utah, who's worked extensively in affordable housing and accessibility of resources. And that was a very meaningful conversation in terms of, in terms of this feedback. And I will say this, there's an airport, because of our first, we've done ABC and NBC and all these different, we were at a filming where Good Morning America 3 filmed, Breeze Airlines and Airways and a foundation, an amazing nonprofit foundation, do a mock boarding exercise in Hartford. We've gotten feedback after some of these airings on TV, and one of them actually led to an additional resource we didn't even know about that said, hey, this is my local, I saw this really meaningful. By the way, we use this resource at this airport. And I don't think that I would name the person specifically. The other thing I will say, and this, I'm not going to use the person's name, but we have this 6417 autism hotline. Anybody can call it, free resources. Again, it's 6417 autism, bilingual. A parent called me and she said, I have a child who is entirely nonverbal. We're seated apart. And she was pretty emotional about it. And she's like, very nervous. What are we, what's going to happen? What are we going to do? And, it's those kind of situations that I think make this really real. They call it getting real or whatever. This, just like Presley and Jason Rudge, and these are real families. These are real people. This is changing the trajectories of people's lives. This isn't some theoretical person on a piece of paper or some theoretical 80 million people. These are actual people whose lives are dramatically affected by these resources. And, the feedback and the interaction that we have on the hotline, that is really important, and understanding and following up. And again, we're short staffed, where we can't possibly help everybody that we'd love to, but it's just, it's very meaningful. And that kind of, getting back to your question, that's, when you think about a single parent in that scenario, traveling with a nonverbal child on the spectrum and impacting their experience and allowing it for potentially having a greater likelihood of success. That is about as meaningful as it can possibly get.
Awesome. So I hopefully have corrected that on the screen. It's your Traveling Wiki hotline is 6417 autism. Yep.
Area code 6417 autism. Anybody can dial it around the world.
Awesome. So and I'll include that in the if it's not, I will include it in the description on travelingwiki.com. Just a few final points I want to bring up, because we're coming up at almost at the bottom of the hour. But what do general people who and this question may have been asked on the ABC affiliate and other press, but I feel like all listeners could relate to this. What do general people who do not have sensory challenges, who do not understand what it's like for, and I'm sure that there are probably some people out there that just don't understand what it is to be on the autism spectrum, that do not understand what it is to have sensory challenges. What can we as a community do to be better people, to be to support travelers with disabilities?
Well, and certainly I wouldn't consider myself the authority on that to be able to answer on behalf of so many different people. And certainly, everyone's perspective and situation is different. I think I recall back to early. So a couple of my early mentors, one was a very senior special needs disability advocate and like a president of an organization in Western Pennsylvania, and one was in California. And they repeated to me, I remember sitting in Denver airport at the time, having the conversation. They were saying, you've seen one circumstance. And so, I think that applies to the individuals that are served. And I think that applies to the environments in which people are traversing. So, I guess what I would say in terms of advocacy, I think the guidance to me was to try and understand as much as possible. Go talk to self-advocates, talk to parents, talk to maybe relatives of elderly individuals, and go try some of these journeys. I mean, the practical reality is that, a journey that's impacted by special needs, the need for resources starts way in advance of the first day of travel. It starts, we talk about the fact there's a resource at LaGuardia, right? It's in one terminal. It's not like Pittsburgh Airport where it's reasonable to walk from, one terminal to another. You've got to know when you're booking your ticket, if you're thinking about leveraging a resource and knowing that it's at LaGuardia, you've also got to know what terminal it's in. If you're going through Atlanta, and I know Atlanta's a Delta hub, and sorry to raise the Delta hub on the United, but I think it's in F, if I'm not mistaken. If you are connecting between two domestic spoke cities through Atlanta, you're likely not connecting, in F. And so, if you only have an hour, you're not going to go back to F and come back. So it's doing the journeys, talking to different stakeholders, understanding the range of perspectives and the different, the circumstances of different individuals who are leveraging the resources, and then the circumstances at different airports. And again, across, you have airlines, you have airports, you have TSA, understanding that range, I think, is really important to try and serve as many people as possible. So that might be my advice.
Awesome. I love what you. I want to just highlight one quick thing that you said of your advice of talking to self-advocates. Because it reminded me of a comment. The voice that you heard at the very top of the episode, the voice that said, "This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and voice to people with special needs." That voice is another athlete, Lito, a friend of mine who has Down syndrome, and something that he said, and I also have said, is that who better to, and I'm trying to recall what he said and what I have said, but who better to talk to people with disabilities than those with disabilities? And I think that also hopefully amplifies your advice as well. We are a little bit over the hour mark, and so can you remind our listeners? I'll put it up again on the screen for those watching the live stream, but I'll put it in the audio in the description below for the podcast. But can you remind our listeners where they can find your Traveling Wiki free special needs resources, the website, the hotline, phone number, social media, TSA Cares resource, your LinkedIn, all those resources that our listeners can, because I'm sure there was a comment from, I'm sure there's a comment that I'm going to put up on the screen in just a moment, but there's our audience is enjoying this conversation today. But can you any social plugs?
Yeah, so certainly travelingwiki.com. It's all one word. So you have a space between traveling, not in my name, but like between Traveling Wiki. I just want people to know when you're finding us, it's one word, TRAVELINGWIKI, travelingwiki.com. Again, we are in 11 languages for all these resources. We publish videos on YouTube at Traveling Wiki. We have a free hotline to contact us about our resources. It's bilingual, 6417 autism, so serving Spanish and English. And then, I will also say this, we're trying to be the party that doesn't have a stake in selling you a specific airline's ticket, selling you a ticket out of a certain airport. To us, we're indifferent as to where you fly out of, what airline you fly. And certainly people, when they need to make decisions about service patterns and economics and all that, they have to identify and evaluate a range of different considerations. We would really value if the airline accessibility line at the airlines and the accessibility page is linked to us, so that people could then go to a central repository of information, so that they can make more informed decisions. So eventually we would love to be there. And then we're also trying to use AI down the road. And we've made we've demoed a couple things for the government already in this regard, to make this all automated, to make it easier to find, rather than having to make manual decisions, about, well, let me find this and let me put it in this language. Be able to just ask a question in a certain language and be able to have a response that gives you some coherent information that you can leverage to make more informed decisions, both before, when you're planning your journey, during travel, etc.
Awesome. I love that, and I'm going to definitely be sharing this conversation with a couple of my colleagues who work in the accessibility teams, the accessibility department at United Airlines, for example, and hopefully I can connect you with some of them to help to make some of that some of your future dreams possible. As one, I know you're not focused on just on one airline, but all travel, but hopefully a connection at United Airlines can help put you in the right direction. With that, before we get into the final thoughts and final question, one of our listeners, who is actually my aunt, who is watching the live stream right
now. Is this Linda's sister?
No. This is actually my dad's sister.
Okay, all right. It's not Linda's sister. Okay.
No. So my dad's name is Adam. He's in the other. Well, he's down the hall from where I'm where the studio is right now. But it's my dad's sister. But yeah. She does very informative interview, and so
Okay. How do you pronounce the first name? Ewa? How do you pronounce the name?
Eva.
Thank you, Eva, for the very kind comment. As I said, it's very serious, right? It's very important, and we take that feedback very seriously. And if there's constructive criticism or constructive feedback that you or anyone else wants to provide, the goal in this is not to be perfect. The goal in this is to make as usable a resource as possible. So I actually like, the things that say, well, you did this well, but this really could be improved. And sometimes we can improve it. And sometimes we can say, some people tell us, we'd love if this could happen. And I'm like, well, I have to find $1 million grant for that to happen. I'd love to get the $1 million grant, but we need a grant to go do that, because we're not selling widgets. We've got we're a nonprofit organization. So I take the feedback very seriously. Thank you very much, Eva, for that comment.
Awesome. And speaking of that, on travelingwiki.com, is there a email or contact form of how people can get in touch with you to provide that both positive and negative feedback?
Yes. There's a contact form, and also, as you note, again, we have to be realistic about this as well. There's also a form, go to PayPal and make, help fund making this possible. That's an important part of this. Like, we don't intentionally, so when we outline this in what we do with the government, we're not about selling plane tickets, widgets, or whatever it is. We are about providing a free resource, and we depend on stakeholders for grants and for donations, and working for organizations that provide grants, so that we can provide this as a public service that is as a stakeholder that takes this very seriously. It's really important to us to to provide this and make it credible and make it usable and make it leverageable. And, again, there's a lot of inaccurate information on the internet. There's a lot of information that is accurate one day, and then the next day, potentially the airport, knocks down the terminal. They rebuild the terminal. Kansas City is a great example of that, right? They just built this brand new terminal. They have an amazing resource now. They didn't have that before. If we had the resource, we didn't update it, you'd be looking at information about the old Kansas City environment, which is not at all accurate.
I absolutely, and I know at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, this might be 10, 15 years from now, but eventually the Terminal 2 at O'Hare Airport, they're gonna knock that down and rebuild like those. So there was gonna be changes even coming from that. I did. Do you have any? I guess just before we get to the final question, do you have any? Do you have any resources in particular about O'Hare Airport in Chicago, as it's one of the biggest airports in the country? For any of our listeners that either travel out of Chicago O'Hare Airport or traveling through, or
Right.
Yeah, do you have any particular connections and resources for this particular airport?
So that we are aware of, there's nothing that's specifically labeled as a neurodiverse or autism specific or Alzheimer's specific environment room. That being said, what I've tried to do is try to go into like nooks and crannies and whatever you call it. It's the old English muffin phrasing. But in all seriousness, find the little areas that might be less overwhelming. Some of the lounges, now I don't think this necessarily applies to all of them. I've certainly found, and I'm apologizing, I know it's United specific podcast. I've certainly found at least one Admirals Club out in H&J that has an area that it may be, I think it may be for like family or breastfeeding or the like, but the staff said, if no one's using it and it's a quiet environment and you have a family with a child that's neurodiverse, we want to, ask us, we will try to make this available, for that purpose. And maybe in some environments you have to we see this in Denver. There's one amazing family room that has a TV on. They would just turn off the TV. So, in terms of O'Hare, the other suggestion I might make is because 1, 2, and 3 are all connected, 5 is separate, right? But you might be able to go, even if you can't find the perfect environment, even if you can't access a lounge with your credit card or whatever the case might be, you might be able to walk to another part. Again, assuming accessibility, walking is a realistic option, or taking the cart to another part of the airport that is, it might be outside of a major connecting time for American when United is really busy, and so you walk to the other terminal. To get a little bit more peace and quiet. We also find that, potentially some of those areas near, again, they may have different names, but there are sometimes pods for family usage. There are sometimes, sometimes you need some privacy. And so there are family restrooms and the like. I mean, there's no autism resource center in O'Hare as it currently stands. And I know I've had some conversations, about some of the T2 Terminal 2 discussions, and, certainly United and American will, be making major decisions about what happens at O'Hare. But I would say if where you are in O'Hare today is not conducive to, and you're there already, if you're not there yet, you might want to think about what are the range of options and make the best possible decision for your family. And if you're there, I would say O'Hare is such a vast ecosystem that of places, in environments. And I guess the natural inclination, maybe for a passenger who hasn't gone through O'Hare before, is to assume that if you're standing in Terminal 1 next to Gate X, whatever it is, that the whole airport is just like it is like at Terminal X. But if you walk to the other terminal when it's not a connecting bank time for that airline, or you walk to, Terminal 2, or, whatever the case might be, it may be a completely different environment. And that's where, again, I think of what we see in sports. We work a lot in sports. We've done 2 Pittsburgh involved in different ways with different sporting events to raise awareness, Pittsburgh Pirates and some of the other sports teams. And what Pittsburgh provided in the last game was a resource, almost a calming environment meant for 10 minutes. It's okay, we have a situation where sensory is a real challenge right now. It's overwhelming. We just need a place to have 10 minutes away from the sensory overload. That's where I think, keeping in mind that what's going around you, if you're standing in front of B5 where we were the other day, right where the checkpoint lets out, right where this, like whatever the main, it's overwhelming. Take the walkway. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. You take the walkway over to C and go to the far end, or even go to the completely other terminal, where the other airlines are. You may have a completely different environment. So if you need that 10 minutes, again, it's not necessarily ideal where you could be waiting in that environment, but you can certainly, in different circumstances, find it. And certainly just call us on your cell phone. If it's a time we're open, we'd be happy to try and help you and figure that out. And let's try and brainstorm. That's what we have it for.
Awesome. So once again, 6417 Autism is your hotline for Traveling Wiki and travelingwiki.com. And so we'll make sure to put those resources in the show notes. Before we get to the very final question, do you have any final thoughts on your vote? I know we've been talking for the past hour and 15 minutes, but it's like you said, it's very valuable information that we are providing to our listeners to learning about this resource. Because I'm sure there's many of our listeners with disabilities or know somebody that is traveling. But do you have any final thoughts on your overall time on Special Chronicles, on this podcast, this live stream that you like to share with our listeners and viewers?
I guess number one, I want to say thank you to you for your work, the work of Special Chronicles, the work of Special Olympics, the work of your mom, Linda, in teaching for so many years and teaching in so many different languages. That's incredibly important, and I think it bears repeating. I also want to say that the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know, and I don't mean that as trite. I mean that as very serious, right? Like, every day I realize, well, I did that wrong yesterday, and I had no idea that it was wrong. I was completely confident in what I was saying, but in fact, it was completely wrong. And the practical reality is this is an onion with just peeling layers off and layers off and layers off. There's a lot there. And so, while we are not perfect, I want to reassure your listeners, we are earnest in our desire to provide these resources, and we value feedback. We value, I hate to keep reinforcing this, but we do have to exist. So the support is helpful, really critical for what we do. And, again, that feedback and learning from you all is especially important as we, try to learn about new resources and try to understand how different environments work and how different individuals interact in society, and, how this can be helpful for them.
Awesome. We've got one final question, but before that, we always include these podcast conversations with, but let's go ahead and roll that bumble.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising.
Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference.
Our demands are
Equality.
Dignity.
And the recognition of our
shared humanity.
We will not stop or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
more divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution
is inclusion.
Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
Ever since I attended the Special Olympics 2019 World Games in Abu Dhabi, I've been asking all of our guests one final question that really gets to the heart of our conversation today. It's not just this podcast. It's not just about entertaining or informational, as I'm sure we've been probably a little bit more informational on this episode. But we to consume this podcast, but we also want our listeners to take inclusion and the inclusion revolution into their own communities. So I'm going to tweak this question to kind of fit a little bit with your foundation, but hopefully this final message as we wrap up we'll get to the health of our past oval in all in 20 minutes to really take action into your communities. So what does inclusion in traveling mean to you?
Well, from the perspective, I mean, what we represent are 20 million individuals that all have, I believe, a unique set of circumstances. And, for us, I think we said it before, it means to me constantly learning how individuals engage and, what their needs are and how different environments and a very complex ecosystem can best serve those individuals. It also means travel. A lot of times we think of travel as meaning traveling to the beach, right? The reality is I'm going to Myrtle Beach on Saturday. I'm probably not going to step on a beach. I am going as part of an environment to educate and empower individuals about special needs resources. So travel is not just about, yes, it's really important for us to enable and empower people to go to the beach, but it's also important for us to enable and empower people to go see the relative, the elderly relative, for us to go empower people to, be the scientist that travels to LA, to empower a community that the situation that presents itself likely creates an environment where they're either maybe in neurodiversity, nonverbal, or have social challenges, to give them that same opportunity to be in front of their boss, to be in front of their peers in an environment where they may otherwise be remote, to be, we talk about this with, again, this is so broad, but with affordable housing. We're working in Iowa. We did an interview, after a Brookings expert on affordable housing. It's the ability to live in an environment where you might be able to buy a house for a tenth of the price of a higher cost of living environment and be able to work remotely for that company and know that you can retain your job because you can get on the plane every 3 months. They wouldn't maybe even consider you if you didn't say that was something you would or could do, and you may not retain it in an environment of constant layoffs if you don't get in front of people. And this is a real consideration for people. Like these are people's lives. So that's what this means.
Awesome. Well, that's a perfect way to wrap up our conversation today. A few final reminders for all of you listening in. Just like you can, we hope that you will check out Jonathan's Traveling Wiki resource and support his foundation, but also we hope that you will join and support this podcast with a monthly or one-time donation, so we can. It costs a lot for us to keep this podcast and microphone and mixer and lights and everything plugged in and powered on. And if you want to help us operate our studio and continue our mission, give respect and voice to those of us with disabilities, you can join now at specialchronicles.com/plus to access all exclusive bonus content, as well as to help support this podcast and this platform, specialchronicles.com/plus. And you can shop our merch store and show your support of Special Chronicles with our Disabled Voices Matter collection managed by Outshine Labels. We have t-shirts. I'm not wearing it today, but we've got t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs. You can shop our store and know that 60% of the profits go back to Special Chronicles. SpecialChronicles.com/shop. One of our listeners in over across the pond in Great Britain has posted she's a 6-time Special Olympics World Games cyclist. I saw a picture about a month or so ago of her wearing it. So SpecialChronicles.com/shop, and tap that follow button. I'll go ahead and wait for you all. Go tap that follow button wherever you're listening, Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever, so you never miss a new episode every Monday. And we have tons of over 750 episodes available to you absolutely for free. SpecialChronicles.com. And thank you, Jonathan, for on this Labor Day, on this Monday evening, for over an hour and 20 minutes. But thank you for taking the time to share with all listeners about your traveling wiki resource.
Thank you so much to everyone for this opportunity, for to you and to so many other stakeholders for everything that Special Chronicles does and everything the Special Olympics does.
Awesome, thank you. And until everyone have a great week. We'll be back next week right here. For those of you watching the live stream, every Monday in September, we have season 2 of our Inclusive Health series. 5 all new episodes that will be coming to you every week. So you can go specialchronicles.com, click on listen to follow and listen on demand anytime. As some people have somebody even asked me, well, how do I listen live or on? Like, some people didn't even know that you can listen to this on demand later, but you can. That's the awesome thing about podcasting. So thank you, thank you again, Jonathan, and for those of you remember, choose to include, and I'll see you next week, same time, same place, right here on specialchronicles.com. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Chronicles podcast. Our podcast was produced by Daniel Smrokowski on the Special Chronicles Network. Follow Special Chronicles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Subscribe, rate, and review Special Chronicles on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, specialchronicles.com, where you can stream our archives of over 500 episodes absolutely for free. Also, there's a list of our favorites, original series, award-winning columns, and blogs. And sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive bonus content delivered to your inbox. Again, specialchronicles.com. Special Chronicles is hosted by Podbean Podcast Hosting. Our live streams are powered by StreamYard. Thanks as always to our business manager, Adam Smrokowski, who always encourages us to never give up. I'm Daniel Smrokowski, back next week with more stories.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.